Imagine you were sitting in a really plush theater seat.
Oh, setting the scene. I like it.
Right. So the lights dim, the velvet curtain rises, and instead of like a grand sweeping musical number or some witty protagonist making this spectacular entrance, you see a completely barren stage.
Just totally empty.
Yeah, just two men wearing bowler hats staring blankly at a single dying tree, and they do absolutely nothing.
Literally nothing.
Literally nothing. And you just sit there in the dark watching them do nothing for 2 agonizing, totally baffling hours.
It sounds like a joke, but it's really not.
No, it's not. Welcome to this custom-tailored deep dive.
Uh-huh.
Today, we are immersing ourselves in this fascinating academic text. It's titled Journey 7, Absurd Theater.
It is a wild ride of a text.
It really is. Our mission today is to explore how the absolute darkest trauma in modern human history, World War II, somehow birthed this bizarre, rule-breaking, totally logic-defying art form.
Right. A movement that basically just threw the entire rule book of reality right out the window.
Exactly. And they did it all to capture the raw, unfiltered truth of what it actually means to just, well, exist.
So, okay, let's unpack this, because to truly feel the shock of the absurd, we really have to look at the normal that it violently destroyed.
Yeah, you have to sort of step into the mindset of a theater goer before the 1940s.
Right. What was that like?
Well, the theater was really a mirror of society's self-reflection, heavily focused on structure, logic, and above all, safe entertainment.
Safe being the key word there.
Exactly. If you bought a ticket back then, you were settling in for a light comedy by like Noel Coward, or maybe a sweeping, toe-tapping musical by Cole Porter.
Sounds lovely, honestly.
Oh, it was. You expected sharp tuxedos, witty banter, and a plot that guided you very safely from point A to point B.
It was pure escapism. I mean, it was a place where you knew the rules of reality still applied. I like to think of it like watching a comfortable, highly predictable sitcom today.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Right, because you know the characters, and you have this underlying guarantee that whatever conflict pops up at minute 5, it's going to be neatly solved by minute 22.
Exactly. With a warm hug and a laugh track.
Yeah.
The world just made sense. But then, obviously, World War II happens.
Yeah, and that changed absolutely everything.
It wasn't just a plot twist to human history. It was like the screen of the television itself was just violently shattered.
Shattered is the right word. The sheer scale of that devastation, it fractured the human psyche on a foundational level. The text we are looking at really zeroes in on this collective trauma.
Right, because we aren't just talking about normal war here.
No, we are talking about the mechanized horrors of the Nazi concentration camps and the unfathomable, instantaneous, destructive power of the atomic bomb.
Which just completely rewrote the rules of what humans were capable of.
Absolutely. These events were profound betrayals of human progress, because for centuries leading up to this, society had slowly replaced its absolute faith in a divine God with a new, seemingly bulletproof faith in science, reason, and human rationality.
The assumption was always that, logic and technology were making us smarter, kinder even, more civilized.
That was the promise. But then science gave humanity the tools to annihilate entire cities in a fraction of a second.
Right.
And human reason and bureaucratic efficiency, that gave us industrialized genocide.
God, it's just so dark when you frame it like that.
It is. So post-war, people looked around at the smoldering rubble of Europe and just felt utterly desolate. The idea of a linear play with a neat moral resolution didn't just feel outdated anymore.
It felt like a lie.
A grotesque lie. You cannot put a neat narrative bow on nuclear fallout.
You really can't. So artists and thinkers, they had to find a completely new way to process a world that had basically lost its mind. Which brings us to the philosophical backbone of this whole movement, right? Existentialism.
Yes, the heavy stuff.
Yeah. The text points out that existentialism stepped in to fill this massive, gaping void in society, positing that existence itself is illogical, pointless, just totally arbitrary.
What's fascinating here is how the text highlights specific thinkers who laid this terrifying groundwork. Like Friedrich Nietzsche started the fracture by famously declaring God is dead.
Which completely shattered the idea of any absolute divine meaning.
Exactly. But then Jean-Paul Sartre took it a massive step further. Sartre argued that humans are, as he phrased it, condemned to be free.
Condemned to be free. Let's dig into the psychology of that phrase for a second, because on the surface, freedom sounds great.
Sure, everyone wants to be free.
Right. But when you apply it to that post-war generation, it is deeply terrifying. If there is no divine plan, no absolute moral value written in the stars, it means nobody is coming to save you.
Nobody at all.
You cannot blame God, you cannot blame the universe, and you can't even blame some inherent human nature for the Holocaust or the atomic bomb. Humanity did that entirely on its own. We have to own it.
And that right there is the ultimate condemnation. Without a pre-written script for life, humans are forced to make choices entirely without guidance. Sartre believed that because the universe has no inherent meaning, the only way to find meaning is through radical authenticity.
By creating it yourself.
Exactly, entirely from scratch.
Wow. And then there is Albert Camus, who really hones in on the specific word that gives this whole theatrical movement its name,
Yeah.
right? The absurd.
Yeah, but it's important to note he doesn't mean absurd like silly or wacky.
No, not at all. Camus defined the absurd as the massive, unbridgeable gap between our hardwired, desperate human desire for meaning and the cold, silent, completely meaningless universe we actually live in.
It's like screaming into a void.
Yes, screaming into a void and expecting the void to, like, politely answer back with a detailed, personalized life plan.
Which is obviously never going to happen. And to illustrate this agonizing condition, Camus pointed to the myth of Sisyphus.
Oh, I love this metaphor. I want you, the listener, to think about your morning commute for a second. Think about waking up, sitting in traffic, going to work, paying bills, going to sleep, and doing it all over again the next day.
Hoping it all adds up to something.
Right, hoping it adds up to some grand purpose. That is Sisyphus. He is the figure from Greek mythology who was condemned by the gods to push a massive boulder up a steep mountain only to watch it roll all the way back down the moment he reaches the top.
Over and over.
For eternity. Camus looked at that endless, pointless repetition and said, that is us. That is the human condition.
It's brutally honest. And critic Martin Esslin later looked at what post-war playwrights were doing with this philosophy, and he officially named the movement the theater of the absurd.
Right, defining it as being out of harmony.
Exactly. Humans totally disconnected from their surroundings, endlessly pushing that boulder.
Okay, wait, but I have to push back on this entire premise.
Okay, go for it.
If the absolute core belief of this philosophy is that life is meaningless, arbitrary, and basically just a joke without a punchline, why bother writing a play at all?
That is the big question.
Like, why spend months agonizing over a script, hiring actors, and building sets? Isn't the very act of creating deliberate art a massive contradiction to the philosophy of pointlessness?
It is. That is the central paradox of the movement. But the goal of these playwrights was never to depress people into a state of total paralysis.
Oh, really?
No. The text notes this brilliant underlying mechanism. Recognizing life's lack of meaning is actually the very thing that pushes people to take responsibility.
Okay, I see.
By putting the pointless on stage, they forced the audience to confront the irrationality of life head-on, effectively stripping away all these comforting illusions of traditional theater.
So they were holding up a mirror and basically saying, look at how ridiculous we all are. Now what are you going to do about it?
Exactly. And this connects to a philosophical concept highlighted in the text called solipsism.
Solipsism.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
the idea that the only thing that can truly be known to exist is the self. Everything outside the mind, society, religion, even the people sitting right next to you in the theater, is fundamentally uncertain.
Wow. So if we are completely isolated, unable to rely on external systems, the only meaning that matters is the meaning you forge for yourself in the dark.
You nailed it.
But, they didn't just invent these stage techniques out of nowhere, though. The text dives into the wild avant-garde DNA that actually built this movement.
Oh, yeah, the precursors are fascinating.
Decades before World War II, you had people like Alfred Jarry putting on Ubu Roy in 1896. I mean, this play was unapologetically vulgar, satirical, and just grotesque.
Basically a theatrical middle finger.
Exactly. He was
Yeah.
throwing a massive middle finger at polite, refined society.
And that was really the first major crack in the foundation. Then came daddyism between 1915 and 1922. The source material perfectly describes it as calculated badness.
Calculated madness. I love that phrase.
Daddyism wasn't just weird art, it physically antagonized the audience.
Right. Performers would stand on stage and scream nonsense poetry simultaneously while banging on tin cans.
They wanted to assault the senses, forcing the audience to experience the chaos of a world that had just gone through the First World War.
And then you had surrealism in the 1920s, diving into Freud and the bizarre, dreamlike logic of the subconscious, plus Luigi Pirandello with plays like Six Characters in Search of an Author.
Where he totally blurred the lines between reality and illusion, showing that truth is entirely relative.
So all these precursors laid the explosive charges. But it took the massive trauma of World War II to actually detonate them, turning these scattered avant-garde experiments into a cohesive, urgent global movement.
A completely new language for the stage.
Yeah. So we have this liberating but terrifying philosophy of a meaningless universe. But abstract philosophy is one thing. How do you physically trap an audience in that void for 2 hours?
It takes a very specific kind of genius.
Right. Who are the architects brave enough to actually build that stage? Let's look at the titans.
Well, the playwrights of the absurd transform the physical stage into an existential landscape. Take Samuel Beckett, perhaps the most recognizable figure of the movement.
The guy with the bowler hats and the dying tree.
That's him. His work is incredibly minimalist, poetic, and rhythmic, but stripped completely bare. For Beckett, the stage is an empty space.
Like in Waiting for Godot. The empty space represents the profound isolation of the human condition. It forces the audience to just sit in silence and feel the agonizing inability of the characters to truly connect.
It's heavy. Now, on the complete opposite end of the aesthetic spectrum, you have Eugene Ionesco. He famously referred to his works as anti-plays.
Anti-plays. Because while Beckett used empty space, Ionesco used cluttered space. He filled the physical stage to the absolute point of suffocation.
Totally overwhelming the senses.
I mean, think about modern consumerism or doom scrolling for a second. We surround ourselves with Amazon boxes. We fill every quiet moment with a podcast or a social media feed, tossing an endless stream of objects and noise into our lives just to avoid facing the silence.
That is exactly what he was getting at. He was staging that meaningless fullness. Like in his play Rhinoceros, the townspeople literally inexplicably transform into rhinoceroses one by one.
Which is a brilliant, totally heavy-handed symbol of mindless conformity and the creeping rise of fascism.
Absolutely. Then we have Harold Pinter, who utilizes the confined space. His style is frequently categorized as the comedy of menace.
The comedy of menace. You watch his plays and feel like you are trapped in a single room with characters who are paralyzed by the fear of the unknown lurking just outside the door.
His work zeroes in on brutal power struggles within those confined walls, the total failure of language to express truth, and just a pervasive sense of political dread.
And finally, Jean Genet brings an intense focus on violence and corruption. He uses the stage to create highly ritualistic, almost abstract clashes between society's marginalized who are labeled evil and the hypocritical bourgeois good.
He really flipped societal norms upside down.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. When we talk about absurdism, we usually picture Parisian cafes and, European intellectuals in turtlenecks.
Right, the classic image.
But the source text specifically maps out how this movement became a global toolkit for dismantling oppression. It heavily spotlights Afrikaans theater in South Africa.
Yes. The translation of these techniques across the globe is remarkable. The text points to Afrikaans playwrights like Andre Piebrank, Chris Barnard, Charles Forey, and Jean Goossen, highlighting how they utilize the absurd.
It specifically singles out Breitenbach's play Johnny Cockroach. And when you look at how this works, it is brilliant. Absurdism wasn't just an aesthetic style choice here.
No, it was a weapon.
It was the only logical weapon against apartheid. Think about it. If the government's laws enforcing racial segregation are fundamentally arbitrary, cruel, and logically bankrupt, then putting on a traditional play with a neat, logical plot actually flatters the oppressor.
Because it makes their world look organized. It implies their system makes sense.
Exactly.
By utilizing disjointed, illogical scenes, nonsensical dialogue, and grotesque characters, playwrights like Breitenbach mirrored the inherently illogical nature of systemic oppression.
They exposed the government's rules for what they really were.
Literal, violent nonsense. They used the mechanics of the absurd to make the establishment look absolutely ridiculous.
Because if the system has no valid rules, the performance cannot follow the rules either. Which perfectly leads us into the actual physical mechanics of an absurdist production.
The nuts and bolts of it.
Right. If you, the listener, were tasked with directing one of these plays today, how do you physically shatter the rule book on stage?
Well, you start by completely abandoning the plot.
Just throw it out.
Throw it out. There is no exposition telling the audience who the characters are or what universe they inhabit. There is no linear progression.
No clear beginning, middle, or end. The source text literally says, Nothing happens.
Nothing happens. The structure is usually circular or episodic. The play ends the exact same way it began.
You are right back to Sisyphus pushing the rock.
Yeah.
The only actual definitive resolution in an absurdist play is death. Anything else is just exhausting repetition.
And to compound that exhaustion, the language completely fails. In a traditional play, you rely on snappy, meaningful dialogue to drive the story forward.
Right.
But here, communication actively depersonalizes the characters.
The text actually mentions two vital techniques for breaking language. The first is the non sequitur. This is when a character makes a statement that logically had absolutely nothing to do with what was just said.
Right, like one character pours out their soul about childhood trauma.
And the other character asks what time the train arrives.
Yes. It creates a profound, incredibly uncomfortable sense of disconnection. The characters are talking at each other, but entirely past each other.
And the second technique is sticomythia. The text defines this as a rapid-fire, back-and-forth exchange of dialogue. Think of it like two people furiously texting each other at the exact same time.
Oh, that's a good way to picture it.
They're sending paragraph after paragraph, hitting send over and over, but neither one is actually reading what the other person wrote.
Just a wall of text.
Exactly. It sounds like a machine gun of conversation, but it signifies absolutely nothing. It is just desperate noise to cover up the fact that they're totally, terrifyingly alone.
And the people making this noise are stripped of any real identity. Characters in absurdist plays don't have clear histories or defined futures.
They're just kind of there.
Yeah, they are defined solely by their immediate, often repetitive actions. They aren't meant to represent complex individuals. They are crude avatars for humanity as a whole.
But they rarely suffer alone. The text points out that these plays frequently feature heavily codependent comic duos.
Like Vladimir and Estragon in Waiting for Godot.
Right, or Pazzo and Lucky. This perfectly reflects our own mutual dependency. We are isolated in the void, yes, but we cling to each other, even if the relationship is toxic, exhausting, or totally nonsensical.
Simply because the alternative of being alone is too terrifying to bear.
Now, bringing all of this to life on stage requires a massive physical toll on the actors. You mentioned the despair, the futility, the death. But the staging is fundamentally reliant on clowning and farce.
It's very physical. It demands immense focused energy for what practitioners call active waiting, doing absolutely nothing, but doing it with agonizing intensity.
Like Beckett's characters endlessly taking off and putting on their bowler hats, inspecting the insides over and over.
Or Ionesco's characters performing rigid, mechanical, clockwork gestures.
The text specifically cites Charlie Chaplin's silent comedies as a profound influence here.
Oh, Chaplin is the perfect precursor to this specific kind of physical despair.
Think about The Tramp. Chaplin is always thrust into brutal, oppressive, hyper-real situations. He is facing extreme poverty, massive industrial machines trying to literally chew him up, or violent authority figures chasing him.
But he responds to systemic horror with physical comedy.
Exactly. He does a funny walk, he eats his shoe, and the audience laughs. But the text makes a crucial point about that laughter.
That laughter is not joyous.
No, that laughter is a psychological defense mechanism.
When the tragedy of existence becomes too enormous, too heavy for the human mind to process, the only defense we have left is to laugh at the sheer ridiculous absurdity of it all. It is the laughter of the condemned.
So what does this all mean for you? You are sitting here today listening to this deep dive, and we obviously aren't standing in the immediate rubble of World War II.
Thankfully.
But think about the modern world. Think about the sheer volume of information overload you face the second you wake up. The pervasive global anxiety.
It's overwhelming.
It is the creeping, sinking feeling that the massive systems governing our lives, whether they are economic, political, or technological, are completely out of our control and, frankly, highly illogical.
The central themes of absurdism really haven't aged a single day. We still constantly experience that massive gap between our desire for a neat, orderly narrative and the chaotic reality we actually live in.
So absurdism isn't just some eccentric, historical style of theater from the 1950s. It is a vital, urgent reminder. When the world feels entirely arbitrary, when the plot of your life feels like it has completely lost the thread and nothing makes sense, you are not broken.
You're just paying attention.
Exactly. You are simply experiencing the stark reality of the human condition. And within that terrifying realization is that Sartre-level freedom we talked about. The profound, inescapable responsibility to stop waiting for someone else to hand you the script and start creating your own authentic meaning in the dark.
This raises an important question, though, especially when we look at how those absurdist playwrights viewed the people sitting in their audiences.
It really does. And I want to leave you with a chilling thought drawn directly from the source material. We've talked about all the bizarre rule-breaking things happening on these stages, but the text notes a key defining feature of absurdist drama that we actually haven't touched on yet.
It's a huge detail.
It is. The characters on stage accept these completely absurd situations without any surprise. A man in the town square literally turns into a charging rhinoceros, and the characters just kind of shrug, sip their coffee, and keep arguing about mundane nonsense.
They completely normalize the madness.
So think about your own daily routine. If we can casually scroll past images of horrific global tragedies, instantly followed by ridiculous celebrity trivialities, seamlessly blending into bizarre AI-generated nonsense on our phones every single day without ever really blinking an eye or questioning the insanity of it all.
Have we accidentally become the very characters those absurdist playwrights were trying to warn us about?
Exactly. Are we living on the absurdist stage right now?